Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to officially start. Today you are here for the EPA Section 609 training and testing. It is an open book test that you will be seeing. You'll be able to read in the book while at the same time you're answering the questions, which will be on the computer. Okay? It is an open book, no time limit testing, but like I mentioned before, we will be out 9:30 to 10. We should be out of here not more than 10, because I know security will be pushing us already at that time because it's a Friday. Okay? So the objective of this training is that you guys get the knowledge you need on what is a refrigerant, how do we handle refrigerants, and that you get certified, so whenever you're working with a vehicle and you need only to lose that compressor and put it aside without even taking out the refrigerant, you need to have this certification. Okay? Good with that? Okay. You all know me. I'm Eligio Marquez. I do this training here in the college, but I'm also the program director for the program, for the automotive programs. Okay, so there was a legislation which January 1st of 2017, this legislation came in effect again. Why I say again? Because before this legislation, it was there. This has always been a regulation. It's just that people were not following like they were supposed to, and with the new refrigerant that came out, they had to make this mandatory again, which will not allow nobody to do anything with refrigerant if you don't have this certification. The certification, what it says is that you went through this training and that you are capable and you understood how to handle these refrigerants. Okay? So this regulation or legislation is through the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and it's the Section 609 of the Clean Air Act. Okay? No, it's not changing. There it goes. The legislation says that every technician must have this license or certification, granted after passing the test. Lifelong license, so you don't have to renew this license again. If another refrigerant comes out, all you have to do is read about that refrigerant and you're okay to go. If you want, you could take the test, only the part of the new refrigerant, and then you'll get an updated license. My license, I got it back in 1986. 2 years ago when this refrigerant started to come out, I went, took the test again, and now it has my original number when I took it back in 1986, and it has a new number from 2 years ago when I took the test again. Okay? Companies that do this is ESCO, MAC, and there is other companies, but ESCO and MAC and ASC also are the only three that are really reliable, confidence, you know, that what you're getting is true. Okay? In this case tonight, we're going to be doing the ESCO test. Okay? The HVAC principles. Function of air conditioner in HVAC system is to reduce temperature and humidity inside a passenger compartment. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it just means taking outside air, bringing it into the passenger compartment and cooling the people inside.
But what happens in that process? You're seeing here we have heat that's being liberated. We have the fresh air going to the front, which is cooling down the system. But what's really happening inside the car?
Yeah, so you're extracting heat from.
You're extracting the heat from that air inside, and that's what makes the cold. Okay? So, heat energy cannot be created or destroyed. It really can't. It can only be transferred from one object to another, which that is called heat transfer. Okay? The principle says that there's going to be conduction, which is the first one we're seeing, convection, which is what we're seeing in the middle, and radiation. Okay? Those are the principles. Heat energy is measured in British thermal units. That's why we call it BTUs. That's what it means. British thermal units. Water cannot get hotter than 212 degrees Fahrenheit at atmospheric pressure. What happens if it goes over 220 degrees Fahrenheit? It will evaporate. Okay? That's why we need to use refrigerants in the cars and not only water. Because if for any reason temperature goes up there in the engine, inside that cooling system, that water will start to evaporate. Okay? Fluid and air conditioning is refrigerant. And each vehicle has a low side and a high side. Okay? So if we see, or if we look, let me see, okay, I have it here. If we look at the components in the operation, even though that on this picture I'm showing you right now, which is the low pressure switch, which I'm already telling you that that's the low side. But if we would put the compressor on the top, we put the compressor at the top, and on the left side, we draw these lines, okay? We'll have, on that left side, you would have all the high side, okay? And on the right side, we would have the low side, okay? So, we have a few components here. We have the compressor. What does the compressor do? I know you guys, in the classes you take, you don't go through AC, and that's why I have this in this training, so you guys can understand what happens in the AC, okay? So, the only thing that that compressor does is pump the refrigerant. That's all it does.
Compressor.
Exactly. Then we have the condenser. What does the condenser do?
Cools the refrigerant, lets the air go through it.
It rejects the heat. That's what it does. So from there, it says here, high pressure switch, but there is the orifice tube, which is called a metering device. Okay? And that'll function kind of the throttle in the car. That's what it is. It will allow the refrigerant to go through depending on what's needed. That's why we have the high pressure switch and the low pressure switch, and we will have a thermostat inside the vehicle. So that thermostat, depending on the temperature you put in, will determine how that throttle will open and close, okay? Then we have the evaporator. What does the evaporator do?
The evaporator, I believe, is when I think whatever the high side, the pressure is at a, is in a air form, and it, the blower motor passes through the evaporator, sending the cold air out.
Correct.
To the path.
So the evaporator, what it does, it's that it will absorb the heat. The condenser rejects the heat, but the evaporator absorbs the heat. Okay? And finally, we would have the refrigerant. The refrigerant, what happens with the refrigerant? We have it as a liquid state, and we have it
It's a dry.
as a gas,
Gas.
right? So on what side do we have liquid, and on what side do we have gas?
Low pressure side would be liquid, and high pressure would be gas. Okay, let's switch them around. Let's switch them around.
Let's switch them around, correct.
Okay.
Okay? We good there? Do we understand this part? Yes? Okay. Without proper refrigerant levels, air conditioner will not work effectively. Okay? When AC started in the vehicles, we were using R12. And that's the name for R12, which I can't spell. R12 was that, there was a brand name Freon that was the most common brand. So everybody started saying Freon. Oh, I gotta put Freon in the car. No, you're putting refrigerant in the car. Freon is only the brand. Okay? So what happened with R12?
If I'm correct, it was toxic, and they wanted to make it less toxic.
Okay?
That's all I know.
And it was affecting,
That was environment.
correct, the environment. So then what they did is they came out with R134A, which was more
Safe.
friendly, safe for the ambient, for the ozone. But now they came out with the new one, which is R1234YF.
When? Just recently?
So why they did this, I don't know. But what you guys need to know is that by 2022, every vehicle that you buy brand new will only have R1234YF. Right now, still in 2019 and 2020, we will find cars with R134A. But for 2022, the legislation said that every vehicle should have 1234YF. What's the problem with 1234YF? Does anybody know?
I think I know something about. Is it a higher pressure system, and it needs like these special fittings so it can take that much pressure? Maybe.
Well, the change of the fittings is so that you don't put R134 in 1234. Just like when they did R12 to 134, they also changed the fittings for that.
Yeah.
So that's why they changed the fittings, so that you don't put in the wrong refrigerant.
Okay.
That's why they did that.
Gotcha.
Okay. The problem with 1234, it's that it's highly combustible. So, saying that, that's why it's so important that everybody that had this license learned about 1234 before they started working with it. Even though they know how to handle the refrigerant, they had to or retest or just read. I read and retested. I did both. Okay? Why? What's the problem here? That you think that these fittings or the hoses of 134 will fit here, but they really don't. But the 1234, it's just that it's bigger. So if you're not cautious, you could connect the hoses of 1234 over this, even though it's not really going to go into the system, but you're going to be letting out that refrigerant. Okay? What I explained a little while ago. Condensers will transform hot, high pressure gas into high pressure liquid. Okay? This is called a serpentine condenser, the one on the top, And the one on the bottom is a parallel flow condenser. Okay? That's important that you all know that also. Not for the test, but for your knowledge when you go out there and start working with cars. Okay? Remember, it still comes in the condenser, high pressure refrigerant vapor, and it goes out high pressure liquid refrigerant. Okay? So, who should have EPA Section 609 certification? Any person who repairs or services a motor vehicle air conditioning system for consideration, payment or bartering, must be properly trained and certified under Section 609 of the Clean Air Act by an EPA-approved program. And that's what you guys are doing today. All technicians servicing a motor vehicle air conditioning system, like appliances, must be certified. Okay. But again, what did I say a little while ago? If you're gonna move that compressor aside because you need to replace the water pump, you need to have a 609. Why? Because when you remove that compressor to the side, if you don't handle it correctly, it could start leaking. And if it starts leaking, you have to have the appropriate equipment to recover that refrigerant before it goes to the engine. Okay? Overlap between Section 608 and Section 609. I also included in the email I sent you where it says what type of vehicle should use, is under the 608 section or it's under the 609 section. Okay? EPA regulations, the first one, 40 CFR Part 82, Subpart F, under Section 608 of the Clean Air Act, address the handling and recycling of refrigerants used in stationary refrigeration and air conditioning systems. Okay? Regulations 40 CFR Part 82, Subpart B, under Section 609 of the Clean Air Act, specifically addresses the servicing of motor vehicle air conditioners. Okay? The only issue is that airplanes are not covered under 609, even though they're moving. There are some farm tractors that are not covered under 609. Some trains are not covered under 609, even though they're moving. Okay? So, what do we do for this type? Is that you would have to, if you want to work with a plane, some farm trucks, or equipment, because it's really the equipment, or the airplane, you would have to go and certify with 608. 608, when you take that test, it has 4 parts. Okay? One is called the core, the other one is type 1, type 2, and type 3. If you decide that you want to take 608 also, you will have the test with all 4 parts. You have to pass core and part 2 to be able to service these 3 vehicles that I just said: train, airplane, and farm equipment. Level 1 and level 3, you don't need that. That is really for what it says here, stationary refrigerants. Okay? So in the case of my students in diesel, if they want to service one of these trucks that has a freezer on the back, they have to have 608. The core and part 2, type 2. Okay? If you take that test and you pass all 4 parts, you will be certified universal. Okay? 608 versus 609. People who service or repair MBAC-like appliances, which would be farm equipment and other non-road vehicles, can choose to be certified under either the Section 609 program or the 608 Type 2. But still, so you can be certified in Type 2, you have to pass the core. So that's why I said core and Type 2. Due to similarities between MBACs and the MBAC-like appliances, EPA recommends that technicians servicing MBAC-like appliances consider certification under Section 609. Okay? Note that buses that use CFC 12, also called R12, are MBACs, but buses that use hydro HCFC 22, also called R22, are not MBACs or MBAC-like appliances, but rather are high-pressure equipment covered under the Type 2 Section 608 certification. And that happens with the freezers and these trucks also. Okay? Let me see if I can go into that. I think this is what I sent you guys, if I'm not mistaken. Should be. No. There's something that's not letting it open. Oh, I know what it is. Okay, so that's the paper that I sent you where it has the 608 and the 609, the two different parts of what covers 608 and what covers 609. Okay. So what is that causes the stratospheric ozone depletion? The cause of that is the chlorine, the fluorine, and the carbon. Okay? So in our case, the chlorine and the fluorine, we will have that where? We'll have it in the refrigerants. We have some of these refrigerants that used to have also carbon because R12 had some carbon. So that's why we're mentioning all three of them here. Okay? Ozone protects us from harmful ultraviolet radiation and helps to maintain stable Earth temperatures. Depletion of ozone in the stratosphere causes increased eye disease, skin cancer, crop loss, deforestation, reduced marine life, increased ground level ozone. Okay? What I've been saying in the last two slides and this one is already related to the test you're taking today, okay? One chlorine atom, the chain reaction destroying as many as 100,000 ozone molecules. Okay? No person may service a motor vehicle, air conditioner, unless they have been properly trained and certified in how to properly recover and recycle refrigerants. Okay? The Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol is an international agreement, a treaty, regulating the production and use of CFCs, HCFCs, halogens, methyl chloroform, and carbon tetrachloride entered into force in mid-1989. So in the mid-1989 is where all this EPA and all these things started to happen. It's where they took action on regulating the refrigerants. which what they did now is that officially in January of 2017, they came and said, okay, nobody was listening to us, so now we're going to be more strict. And why do I say more strict? Because R134, any of us could go and buy our R134. That didn't matter how much you needed. You could go and buy it. You can go and buy a 30-gallon cylinder. Right now, R134, you guys can go and buy it. One little can of 16 ounce. That's all you can buy. R12, it's not in the market anymore, even though there's a few brands around that say that they're R12. They're not really R12. It's a mix that's coming from China, which is very highly explosive. So be careful when you buy something like that, okay? R1234YF, 16 ounces, will cost a technician. Do you know how much?
I think I do.
How much?
I mean, I was hearing numbers like $800 or something like that for like a,
Well, that's a cylinder.
yeah,
But the 16 ounce little bottle,
yeah.
it's $160. One little bottle.
Expensive.
So right now, a new vehicle with R1234YF, if it's low in refrigerant, what happens?
Yeah, good car.
You have to fix it so that when you put refrigerant in it again, it won't cost you that much. Because right now, with R134, you go and for $60, you get it recharged. And if it's leaking in 6 months, you go again and have it recharged again for $60. If you do that with the new refrigerant, it's going to cost you $200, $250 each time you go. So, okay? And the other thing is that if you don't have 609, you will not be able to buy it. Okay? The penalty. This is very important. Section 609 of the Federal Clean Air Act is regulated by the United States Environmental Agency, EPA. Failure to comply could cost you and your company as much as $27,500 per day per violation. And there is a bounty of up to $10,000 to lure your competitors, customers, and fellow workers to turn you in for any violation. Service technicians who violate the provisions of the Clean Air Act may be fined, lose their certification, and may be required to appear in a federal court. What am I saying here? Did you guys understand what I just read?
I think so. That's pretty crazy.
If you see Chris letting refrigerant go to the air, and you grab that phone and call EPA, EPA is going to come looking for Chris, but he's going to give you $10,000.
That's crazy.
That's under the law that was signed in January 2017. Okay? The 3 R's. What are the 3 R's?
Or recycle.
Recover, recycle, and reclaim. The process of recovery, recycling, and reclaiming sounds similar, but they are quite different. To recover is to remove refrigerant in any condition from a system and store it in an approved external container. Recovered refrigerant may not be returned to a motor vehicle air conditioning system without first being recycled or reclaimed. First thing that happens when you go to a shop right now is that they do not have the equipment to see what refrigerant is inside that vehicle. So they just recover it, they fix your car, and they pull it back in without being reclaimed and recycled. So maybe what they took out of your car was pure refrigerant, but what was in that bottle was from China. And that's what goes back into your car. It's contaminated now. Okay? To recycle is to clean the refrigerant for reuse by separating the oil and removing moisture by passing it through one or more filter dryers. Recycled refrigerant may be returned to the vehicle. Contaminants in recycled refrigerant are limited to moisture, refrigerant oil, and non-condensable gases to the levels set by the Society of Automotive Engineers. Okay? That's why we have to buy not only the gauges, not only the refrigerant to put in the car, we have to buy the analyzer so we know what type of refrigerant we're dealing with before we go to the recycling machine. Because maybe what you have in the recycling machine is good and what you're taking out of that car is not good. So that's why we need to first identify before we go to the recycle. Okay? To reclaim is to process refrigerant to a level equal to the new product specifications as determined by the chemical analysis. Reclaimed refrigerant must meet standards set forth by the Air Conditioning and Refrigerant Institute in ARI standard 700-93. Reclaimed refrigerant is intended for sale and may be used in any application. So if it was reclaimed, was completely clean, and you can use it again. Okay? Required equipment. The EPA approved the use of two types of equipment: recover, recycle, and recover only. And the EPA has approved the use of two types of equipment, which is recover, recycle, and recover only. Saying the same thing two times. Why? The recover recycle equipment extracts the refrigerant from the vehicle and cleans the refrigerant on site. The recover only equipment extracts the refrigerant into an approved container to be sent off-site for reclamation. Okay? Approved equipment must bear a seal that states designed, certified to meet SAE standards. So you can't just grab any cylinder to recover all this. You need to have an approved cylinder that has that seal. Okay? SAE. Replace standard J2210 with standard J2788 in October 2006. Effective January 29, 1998, the EPA adopted rulings for recover, recycle equipment where CFC 12 and HFC 134A shares a common refrigerant circuit. Okay? So that was saying that a vehicle that had CFC 12 or R12, all you had to do was you would take out that refrigerant, you would change the O-rings from the black ones to the green ones. You would put an adapter. That would mean that what's in there now, it's going to be R134, and you can do that. But a vehicle that has R134A today cannot use R1234YF. Cannot. They cannot be mixed.
It's gonna destroy the system, what is gonna happen?
It can even explode. Because like I said before, R1234YF, it's highly flammable, which 134A is not. Okay? These single circuit machines contain special features to prevent cross-contamination in the refrigerant circuit and must meet the SAE standard J1770. Okay? Recovery cylinders, we mentioned it before. Refillable cylinders must be UL or DOT approved and must be hydrostatically tested and date stamped every 5 years. So it needs to be inspected. So it needs to have that seal. Okay? Disposable of empty or near empty cylinders. Before disposing of an empty or near empty disposable cylinder, the remaining refrigerant must be recovered. Nothing should be inside that cylinder. Attach the cylinder to the recovery unit and remove any remaining refrigerant. Once that cylinder has been reduced from a pressure to a vacuum, it should be marked empty and is ready for disposal. So the same process that you do in a vehicle when you're going to put refrigerant in it, that you put the vacuum system to take out everything from there with that recycling machine. You have to do the same with any empty container that you're going to throw away. Okay? Remember, the gauges go to 0 and then they go below 0. That means that it's in the vacuum state. But when you finish on a vehicle or on this cylinder, you must turn off the machine, leave everything there, gauges on, and for at least a minimum of 2 minutes, that vacuum gauge, that vacuum that you have there, that gauge cannot move. If the gauge does not move, means that the vacuum that you did is correct. Okay? Okay. That's what we just said. Shipping and transportation. Normally we don't do this. Normally it's a company that does that. But in case you have your own shop and whatever, you got to be careful also with this. Or if you go and did not order from any store to bring you the refrigerant, you need to be careful how you're transporting the refrigerant. When transporting a cylinder containing used refrigerant, the Department of Transportation requires that you attach DOT classification tags and place refrigerant label on each cylinder. Important. Refillable cylinders used for transporting recovered pressurized refrigerant must be DOT approved. All refrigerant recovery cylinders should be inspected for rust. If they show signs of rust, they should be reduced to 0 psi and discarded. Some states may require special shipping procedures to be followed based on their classification of used refrigerants. Check with the DOT and the EPA and the state of origin. Okay? Recovery requirements. Was the recovery unit shut off? Wait at least 5 minutes to determine if all refrigerant has been removed. I just said 2 minutes, right? And the new law says what? 5. If the system returns to a positive pressure, indicating that there is still refrigerant left in the system, additional recovery is required. Repeat the recovery operation until the vehicle AC system vacuum remains stable for 2 minutes. There are my 2 minutes that I just said. Manifold gauge. When the gauge set is removed from the vehicle or charging source, it must be connected to the recovery equipment to recover the refrigerant from the hoses. So we see in a lot of shops that they finish putting some more refrigerant in a vehicle, they just disconnect the hoses and they go and hang them on the wall without removing what's left in the hoses. That must be removed. Before charging a vehicle air conditioning system with recycled refrigerant, the refrigerant container should be tested for the presence of non-condensable gases, which would be air. Okay? So again, you have to use what?
The
The identifier.
yeah.
Leak testing. Important. Although the EPA has not mandated leak repair at this time, when servicing an automotive air conditioning system, you should repair leaks whenever possible. Adding refrigerant to a leaking system is harmful to the environment, a waste of valuable refrigerant, and it is unlawful in some states. There are states that will fine you if you put in refrigerant in a leaking system. The right procedure is, before beginning a service job, the technician should perform a thorough visual inspection and leak check of the system. So you need to verify that there is no leaks on that vehicle. If by any reason you put refrigerant in a vehicle and you notice right away that there is a leak, you must recover back that refrigerant and tell the customer, the only way I can fix or put your refrigerant in is that I fix that leak. Okay? Remember, Chris, they can go and say that you're doing that and they'll get $10,000 and you'll be fine. Okay? Proper charging and recharging of MVAC systems. The only accurate method to charge a system that requires a critical charge is to weigh the refrigerant into the system. What is this saying? That we need to have also how to weigh the bottle so you know how much is in there, so then you know how much you're going to put in the vehicle. Unless you have money and you buy one of these fancy machines that will be measuring what you're putting in, and if you have an empty system, you look at that label on the hood and says this will use only 1.5 pounds, and you will set that machine 1.5 pounds, and when it reaches that, the machine will shut off. But we're talking about 10, 15 grams. Okay? A kilogram is equal to 2.2 pounds. 1 ounce is equal to 28.3495 grams. 1 gram is equal to 0.035273 ounces. It's highlighted. Safety. When handling refrigerants or operating recover recycle equipment, you should wear safety glasses, protective gloves, and follow all equipment manufacturer safety procedures. Does that sound familiar? Right? When you're in the labs here in the shop, in the labs in the program?
PPE.
PPE. Inhaling refrigerant vapors can cause heart irregularities, unconsciousness, and oxygen deprivation leading to death. Never expose CFC-12 to open flames or hot glowing surfaces. At high temperatures, R12 will form hydrochloric acid, hydrofluoric acid, and phosgene gas. Okay? HFC 134A. The July 2015 rule bans HFC 134A in new light-duty vehicles beginning in 2021. What does that mean?
Light-duty vehicles will be forced to switch to the new refrigerant?
I mentioned before that every vehicle for 2022
Yeah.
Has to have.
will have 1, 2, 3, 4 YF, right? But this rule in July of 2015 says that any new light-duty vehicle by 2021 has to have 1, 2, 3, 4 YF. So in a new light-duty vehicle, the 2022 law does not apply. This law applies. Okay? Most, but not all, automakers equip their vehicles with PAG oils. PAG and POE oils are more hygroscopic than mineral oils. Hygroscopic oil has an affinity for moisture absorption. So when you go and buy oil to use with your refrigerant, you got to make sure that you buy PAG oil and not POE oil, because this one will bring you moisture to the system, which will contaminate your refrigerant. Okay? Retrofitting HFC 134A. You will replace the old dryer or accumulator with a new one that contains an XH7 or XH9 desiccant. Okay? A compression ratio of 8:1 or higher may cause compressor failure. A high compression ratio can be caused by an overcharge, insufficient airflow, or inefficient condenser. So what we're saying is that if we overcharge, we can ruin the compressor. If we don't have enough flow, we can ruin the compressor. And if the condenser is a little bit clogged, it'll ruin the compressor. That's what we're saying here. Okay? Alternatives to CFC-12. As blends make their way into the retrofit market. What did I say about blends? You will need to understand how blends function. Some of the blends are ternary, which means they are a 3-part blend. Most ternary blends are used with an alkyl benzene lubricant. Blended refrigerants will leak from a system in uneven amounts due to different vapor pressures. Due to these varying vapor pressures, charging in the liquid phase is required. Okay? So now, I will give you guys 15-minute break, and when we come back, we will do the testing. When you guys come back, if you have your material, I can let you read a little bit before you start the test, or you can, since you're going to have a book, you can go ahead and start the test. Okay?
All right.
So let's take a 15-minute break, and we'll be back.